I am ready.
Good evening, everyone. It is time for our third and final candidate forum for tonight. Thank you all for coming. I'm Elizabeth McNamara, the editor of East Greenwich News. We are putting on these candidate forums this year, again, with the East Greenwich Chamber of Commerce. Steve Lombardi, the head, is right there. Thank you, Steve. And we have the space from New England Tech. Thank you, New England Tech. And we have a couple of Rotarians here today. You guys can raise your hands. Donna and Harry, and they're going to be drawing the questions and varying them up to me and getting their exercise. So thank you to the Rotary, and they are also helping offset some of the costs of our video. We have video tonight from Nova Pro Media. That's Jesse Tolpa right down in front, and his assistant Caitlin. And then we have timers. Kate Glass, who's our assistant editor, and Greg DeGroot, who's on our board, and Stephen Susi is here somewhere. He does our social media. There he is. So anyway, thank you all to those people who are here helping, and to the candidates themselves for being willing to do this. I know it's a big deal to run for office. It's an even bigger deal sometimes to get up and be willing to answer questions, so thank you for that. The format is just lots of questions. An opening statement, lots of questions, closing statements. So with that, I will start with opening statements, and we're going to have Amanda go first.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Good evening, everyone. My name is Amanda Blau, and I'm running to be the next state representative from Rhode Island House District 30. I want to begin my opening remarks this evening by thanking the hosts of tonight's forum, first and foremost the East Greenwich News, the East Greenwich Chamber of Commerce, and the East Greenwich Rotary Club. I'd also like to thank New England Tech for allowing us to use their space this evening. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight and to address questions from the constituents of District 30. While there are many familiar faces in the audience, for those I have not yet met, I'm Amanda. I live in West Greenwich, right next to Carrs Pond, with my dog Oswald. I'm a practicing attorney. I received my law degree from the University of Michigan after graduating from URI with a degree in business administration and a degree in communications. I only took one political science course while at URI, but I had become interested in public service and specifically education policy shortly after graduating from high school. While I was in college and commuting to URI, I ran for a seat on the Charahoe School Committee, the school district that I graduated from, and for 4 years I represented the town of Hopkinton on that committee. I ran for the school committee because I thought the town lacked representation and that the committee did not have someone on it who brought the perspective that I did. For those same reasons, I'm running to represent District 30. First, to offer a different perspective than the current representative, and to bring public service and representation back to this seat. I believe that over the course of the next 45 minutes, you will see some important differences between us, and that by the end of the night, I will have earned your support. Thank you.
I appreciate the enthusiasm. If you can clap, and we've got less than 45 minutes, so thank you. And now on to Justine.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Also, to the few people that I don't know here, and maybe the people watching at home, although I think I am inescapable oftentimes from people in East Greenwich and in the district. I'm Justine Caldwell. I have been your state rep for the last 4 years, so this will be my third term coming up, 6 years. I live in East Greenwich with my daughter Lulu, who is 7 and in 2nd grade at Frenchtown Elementary School, and my son Escher, who is 10 and in 5th grade at Eldridge, who is also at his very first travel basketball team tryouts right now. And I actually, when this is concluded, have to swing by the high school and pick him up on my way home. My husband David, who's a small business owner and a software developer, and our 65-pound puppy Pepper. Since we only have 2 minutes, I just want to talk about the 2 biggest accomplishments we've had in the past 4 years up at the State House in East Greenwich. I have gone up time and again against wealthy special interests for the people of East Greenwich and won. The biggest issue since I've moved to East Greenwich has been the threat of a medical waste facility on Division Road, known as Med Recycler. And when none of the towns or anyone could get that project out of East Greenwich and out of West Warwick, Senator Valverde and I did that. We went up to the State House. We fought on behalf of East Greenwich. I worked with opponents who campaigned against me last time in town or campaigning against me right now to get that done. We also passed the strongest ban on high-capacity magazines in the House, so people can only have 10 shots before they reload. Previous to that, people in Rhode Island,
Excuse me, nothing during the comments, please.
which is overwhelmingly popular in the district and in the state, and now people in Rhode Island have to reload after 10 rounds. That's the strongest magazine ban in the nation. It came after, a shooting in Ohio where a gentleman got off 41 rounds in 30 seconds. And although he was disarmed by police officers, he still managed to kill over 9 people in less than a minute. I promised that I was going to pass those bills when I ran. I know it's important for the district. And I think it will be enough to earn your vote for a 3rd term. Thank you.
This is for Justine first. Should the state legislature take a role in school curriculum issues, how do we teach children about both the positives and the negatives in our country's history?
Thank you. The state legislature does take an active role in school curriculum. This year, we passed a bill in the House sponsored by Barbara Ann Fenton Fung to include Asian American history and curriculum. We passed a bill, I believe, by Chairwoman Anastasia Williams to include African American history. And I believe we also passed a bill by Representative Lauren Carson to teach about climate change and climate action in schools. So we do take a very active role in telling RIDE what we believe and our constituents believe students should be taught in school.
Amanda?
Sure, so I agree that the state legislature has some role in directing RIDE and in directing curriculum. And there is a way to teach all American and world history, the good, the bad, and the ugly, in a politically neutral manner. And it's RIDE's, obligation to put out curriculum. But it's also important that parents and taxpayers have access to that curriculum if they want to see what's going on. And I think, there is an important role in holding RIDE accountable. I mean, our RIDECast scores are being upheld right now, and I think that's also important information for local school committees and local towns and parents to have access to, and to make sure they can hold the towns accountable and the schools accountable.
Actually, Elizabeth, I'm going to use one of my 3.
Okay. Candidates have 3 opportunities to rebut, and Justine is taking that, a 1-minute rebuttal.
This is not specifically to rebut anything that Amanda has said, but I just want to make it clear that parents do have access to a lot of these things. It is a myth and an attack on teachers, an attack on public education, the rhetoric surrounding this. My 2 kids go to Frenchtown Eldridge. In my email box right now, I have PowerPoint presentations from both of their teachers about what they're learning for the entire semester. What they're learning about, what their role is, what the curriculum is. I have all of that. I have never once had anyone from East Greenwich come to me and say, I need this from my child's teacher, and they will not give it to me, because that simply just is not happening.
Thank you. So we are back to, Amanda,
Yep.
sorry, I'm going to.
That's okay.
Do you think elections in Rhode Island are fair and secure? If not, what do you think needs to be done to make them more secure? And what are your views on early voting and voting by mail?
So I think the Rhode Island election system is secure. I do think that the voter rolls could use further cleaning up. As someone who spends hours every day looking at them and going door to door, I can tell you, sometimes you don't find the people at the house that the voter roll says live there. So there's definitely more work to do cleaning up the voter rolls. I think early voting and mail ballot voting are good options. I voted by mail all 3 years I was in law school, and I voted early this year in the primary so that I could be at the polls on primary day. I plan to vote early again on election day. I think the window of time could be shortened. I think the numbers from primary day show that a lot of people voted in the right before election day, the Monday before, or even the 5 days preceding. I don't think it needs to be as long as it currently is.
Thank you. Justine, same question.
Oh, thank you. Yes, absolutely, our Rhode Island elections are safe and secure. You know, in my last election and our senators, there are people, our opponents, people, you know, in this room who thought our elections were stolen just right here in East Greenwich. So if folks don't think that that kind of scare tactic and fear mongering is a problem, it really is. We have safe and secure elections here in Rhode Island. I was very proud to support the Let Rhode Island Vote Act, which it did. Brought in the early voting period and the use of mail-in ballots. I like to vote on election day. It is, you know, a holiday in my house. And so I have not early voted in a long time, but I know it's very useful for people. You know, when I think about our teachers, for example, we have election day off here in East Greenwich, and our teachers are supposed to be hosting parents for parent-teacher conferences all day. So, you know, it's not always easy for folks to get out there and vote on election day, so I think they work well. And I agree with the senator that we should have same-day voter registration.
Thank you. This goes to Justine first. What can you do to change the state mechanism for special education and other funding to ensure that East Greenwich schools get a fair allocation?
So we are going to be re-looking at the funding formula soon, which I think everybody has discussed up until now. I think it's very important that East Greenwich has a proven, effective representative in the House when we look at rebuilding and redoing our funding formula, because as somebody pointed out, it can be difficult to go up there from East Greenwich to talk to the other reps from all the other school districts in less affluent areas and say, we need more money here in East Greenwich. So the special ed formula is a place that we really want to make sure we're getting every amount that we can, because that should be even throughout the districts based on the amount of kids we have in the system. Both school committee member Eugene Quinn and Nicole Bucca are experts in this matter, and I look forward to bringing them up to the State House next year to talk with our fiscal advisor, like I did the first year that I was state rep, I think with Mark or Mike and Carolyn and some of our former school committee members to talk to them about what East Greenwich needs.
Thank you. Amanda?
Thank you. So the last time the funding formula was adjusted in the state, I was serving on the Charahoe School Committee. So I was very involved working with my state reps from Hopkinton and the other districts in Charahoe on what it meant for school districts to be impacted by the change in the funding formula. District 30 has both the East Greenwich public school system, but also has the Exeter West Greenwich school system. And so you need a representative who's going to be able to advocate for both towns and be able to balance the interests of both school districts and make sure that, you know, when I was on the Charahoe School Committee, the regionalization bonus was taken away. Transportation costs are higher for bigger rural regional districts. The issue of the special education COVID money and being dispersed to the cities and towns through the funding formula, even though COVID hit every school district equally, that's been brought up numerous times at the school committee meetings, and it's an issue I think is important. And as a former school committee member, I'm happy to work with our local officials and make sure that we get the funding balanced out. But I think it's important to remember that this district takes into consideration 2 towns, and those towns have different and unique interests, and you have to balance both of them.
Thank you. Amanda first. The truck toll instituted under Gina Raimondo has been ruled unconstitutional. Do you agree with the state's decision to repeal that ruling if the ruling stands How could we make up the $40 million annually the state has gotten from the truck tolls?
So I'm not going to give my legal advice as a lawyer, but I would not appeal the decision. I think the dollar amount that has already been spent litigating this issue, which as many state representatives and state senators who served during that time have said, they raised alarms about this being unconstitutional, and that's what the court held. I would not spend more money appealing it. And I think as one of very few avid Capitol TV watchers, I watched the entire budget debate, and I have respect for the amount of time you spend up there doing that. But there's a ton of waste, and there's a ton of money to move around in that budget. There's a lot of tax credits that go to special interests, and we can fill budget holes where we want to prioritize certain things. And so if we want to stop discriminating against the truckers and we don't appeal, we can fill that budget hole. There are a number of other issues that we can make a priority and find funding for through the budget process, and we don't need to tax anybody to get those additional funds. There's plenty of money spent in a $13.6 billion budget for the smallest state in the country.
Thank you. Justine?
Thanks, Elizabeth. So the news about the appeal about the truck tolls came out a few days ago. I'll be honest, I'm kind of agnostic on the appeals process, and I'm more focused on what happens after the appeal is upheld or denied. You know, we're going to have, as Senator Valverde pointed out, we need this money for our infrastructure. You drive around, our roads are crumbling, our bridges are crumbling. We do need to make up that money somehow, and we will figure out how to do that. Further, I find that this conversation about truck tolls is often brought up to talk about how eventually we're going to toll cars, eventually we're going to toll cars. We are not going to toll cars. There's no appetite in the General Assembly or the House of Representatives to toll cars. And so I want to make sure that that is perfectly clear to everyone, and no matter what happens after the governor decides to appeal or potentially decides not to appeal, you know, that will be my focus on how to make up that money.
Thank you. This is to Justine first. The state mandate for 10% affordable housing does not take into account mobile homes. East Greenwich has 97 mobile homes. I'm sorry, I don't have that figure for West Greenwich. But in East Greenwich, if we added those to our total of affordable housing, that would get us to 7.2% as opposed to our current 5.5%. Would you support legislation that would allow communities to count mobile homes toward their affordable goal?
Well, any property that fills the definition of what a low-income and affordable housing means by the law should be counted towards it. But the point of affordable housing and the 10% goal is not to say how many homes that we already have can we count towards this goal. It's to make more affordable housing for people to live in, right? That's the goal. The goal is not to say, oh, look, what if we count, I mean, my house is pretty small by East Greenwich standards. What if we throw her in? Then we're even closer to the goal. What we really have to do holistically is look at the ways in which we can increase affordable housing in East Greenwich, whether you count the mobile homes or not.
Okay, thank you. Amanda?
Yes, I would count them. I think legislation has been introduced in the past, and if my recollection is correct, by the former representative of this seat, to count them and to include them in the inventory. I mean, East Greenwich is grappling right now with an issue of how to get to 10%. Many cities and towns are, and I think what's a more important conversation is that these decisions be held at the local level, and that our local cities and towns have control over where and how many new houses and where to build and what effect that's going to have on town services. My opponent voted on a package of 10 affordable housing bills this year that takes local control away and puts it at the state level, and we're starting to, see the effects of that right now. And you can't say we've got to reach this goal. Not necessarily. The law that instituted this 10% is 30 years old. there are people in this town that I think would support looking at that 10% and saying, is that reasonable? Why are some cities and towns exempted when they're still not at 10%? You know, it's always that, you know, East Greenwich is affluent and should get less money, or, you know, has a high median income and therefore should have more affordable housing. Let's bring local control back to East Greenwich and West Greenwich and let them decide where we're gonna put these new homes and which homes count and who needs affordable housing in their town and what that means. Thank you.
Elizabeth, I get to respond, right? Because she brought up my votes.
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. So we did, as I think Representative Chairman Shanley pointed out, really prioritize affordable housing this year in the House of Representatives, which is wonderful because we're in a crisis and people need a place to live, and they should be able to live in East Greenwich. And the problem, as Amanda points out, that bill is 30 years old, 1991, the one that affects the 400-unit development that people are thinking about. You know, that probably hasn't been used until the past 2 years here in East Greenwich and around the state. No Republican has ever tried to undo it. No Democrat has ever tried to undo it. You know, now if it's something that's being used and it's not working for the towns, well, now is the time to go up there in January and say, this actually isn't working for East Greenwich. It's probably not working for some other cities and towns. And I talked to people at their doors, I talked to people on the phone about some ideas that we, you know, could do to make sure we have more local control. But I work very closely with our town council, and the idea that we have wrested away local control from East Greenwich is simply untrue.
So this goes to Amanda. There is no state mandate for masks in school now. What is your thought on mask requirements?
Mask requirements in schools.
Yes, sorry, in schools.
So as a state representative, I would not introduce legislation or support legislation that mandates masks in schools.
Well, you are all going to have to get ready to put your hands together again, because when I yelled hallelujah when the kids got to remove their masks here at UG, I have a son, like I said, who had moved to the East Greenwich schools that year because of difficult circumstances, who was significantly impacted socially and otherwise by having to wear a mask in school. And I was overjoyed when that day came, and I am overjoyed that that seems to be behind us and would not be, you know, looking to make that an issue again.
Well, I'm going to use a rebuttal if you don't mind.
Yes.
Thank you.
And you forgot to clap because I said the same thing.
Again, like I said, I watch an extensive amount of Capitol TV, and so some of the bills, you know, can't keep them all straight, but I do recall there being an amendment proposed that would separate out the ability to take the masks off of school children and separate it out from an executive order from the governor, and you voted against that, which would, if you had voted for it.
Elizabeth, this is like crazy. Elizabeth, this is like.
Yeah, no, I agree. If you just don't hoot and holler, if you want to clap after somebody's finished speaking, that's terrific.
And I'll respond.
And
I wasn't
Oh,
finished.
she's got
sorry.
30 seconds.
Yes.
That's okay. And so I was just gonna say, I mean, I think it's great that the masks are off children now. There are a lot of people in this town advocating for that long before that decision was made. You had an opportunity to act earlier than when the governor, you know, removed the masks from children, and you didn't act at the time. So that was my only point on rebuttal.
So when we voted on that, the East Greenwich schools were only going to be affected by the mask mandate for 11 more school days from when all of that was going to end. And I felt like that 11 days was certainly not going to hurt anybody any more than they'd already been wearing them for that time. And also it gave the teachers, it gave the administrators, and it gave the parents and students time to get vaccinated if they had not become vaccinated yet, now that kids were not going to be wearing masks in schools.
Thank you. I have a lot. So now it's to Justine. Would you back universal pre-K for the state in light of a childcare shortage and the high cost of childcare?
Yes, I'm a huge proponent of universal pre-K. I am a House appointee on the Permanent Legislative Commission on Childcare, where we meet once a month with House and Senate colleagues and childcare providers from out the state and from state agencies. When I ran for office the first time, I would have had 2 kids who could have been in pre-K. The biggest issue that we hear about in this commission and this barrier to get to pre-K is the staffing and the reimbursement rates and the amount of money that we pay the teachers who have our earliest learners. I do not know about any of you. I am not an elementary school teacher. I do have a 7 and a 10-year-old, and for 1 hour a week in the morning at Frenchtown, I go and teach 16 little Frenchtown Bears, outdoor explorers. And we walk around, and this week, spoiler alert, we are doing a leaf scavenger hunt. And, you know, those kids learn through play. And I will tell you, those 16, 7-year-olds are a lot. And, you know, to do the work of teaching our youngest kids is the hardest and most important work we can do. And folks need to be paid much better than they are right now for their labor, or else we will never get to a place where we will have quality, affordable, universal. Well, I guess it would be affordable because it would be universal pre-K. Affordable to the state, universal pre-K.
Thank you. Amanda?
Yes, I absolutely support it.
Okay.
I don't teach Frenchtown Bears, so I have nothing more to add.
Okay, thank you. Amanda, what do you think of Rhode Island's recent gun laws? Should Rhode Island go farther?
No, I don't think Rhode Island needs to go any farther with its gun legislation. I think the laws that were just passed this session went too far. I think even the magazine capacity bill that Representative Caldwell sponsored is the harshest, strictest gun law in the country. And a magazine capacity bill without a grandfather clause has been legally untested in this country. I think the assault style bans that have been proposed, they also are the furthest in the country. I think on an issue like this, where you are constantly balancing impeding on people's constitutional rights with community safety, it is important to be thoughtful and it is important to be measured on these issues. And I don't think we need to be first to do everything. I think we need to be best at doing everything. And I think this is
Let's wait until she's done.
I think this is an incredibly sensitive issue because I think we can all relate to the feeling of what we see on the media when there's a mass shooting, or when there's a string of homicides in our cities, or when we hear about a suicide in our town. But you have to balance the constitutionality of this right, and I'm sure we're going to get to other constitutional rights, where there's a balance between infringement and providing for community safety.
Thank you. Justine.
Thank you. Obviously, as the leader of the gun safety bills in the House of Representatives, I think they were a great package of bills that were passed. I think we should go farther, and we will, with a ban on assault weapons next year and a bill to require the safe storage of firearms. You do have to be thoughtful and measured, but I think, as we can see here, even from some of the reactions in the room, there isn't always a place for thoughtfulness and measurement. There are folks in this room who are on the other side of me on this issue, who I won't name, who I've said, let's get coffee. Do you want to talk? Do you want to compromise? No. The folks from the Second Amendment Coalition, they don't want to compromise. They didn't want to compromise after 21 kids were murdered in Uvalde while an entire police force sat outside. It is not the harshest or the strictest, it is the strongest ban on high-capacity magazines in this country. And I think for that, the majority of East Greenwich voters, the majority of Rhode Islanders are proud and happy, and their kids are going to be safer at school, and you're going to be safer in the grocery store, and at church, and at, you know, a music festival.
Excuse me, I really need people to stop interjecting because I told these people I was going to give them a platform where they could speak and they wouldn't be interrupted. And it went really well last week. It's gone well for all the other candidate forums. If we want our candidates to be able to tell us what they think, let's let them do that. Afterwards, if you disagree, you can write letters, you can, you know, but right now, let's just give them the dignity of hearing them out, okay?
And that is exactly why we don't have this issue is so polarized.
I'm going to use a rebuttal if Justine's done.
Justine, are you done?
I think so.
You have
Sorry,
30 seconds
I did
left
kind
if
of
you
cut
want.
you off. I apologize, and Amanda?
Yes,
Yeah,
so,
sorry.
I mean, everyone, this is my, you know, this is one of the reasons I ran for office. Gun safety, my son was 9 months old when Sandy Hook happened. You know, the other side of folks on the gun debate have come to the State House and said I should be strung up outside and brought back in a body bag. They have called my house and they have told me that they will come to my house and show my family and I what an assault weapon can do. No one is going to intimidate me to not fight for these bills on behalf of all of your kids and all of your families. And we're going to prevail, as we have every single year since I've been at the State House.
Okay, it's now Amanda's turn to rebut for 1 minute. Thank you.
So I just want to say, I mean, I haven't gone up to the State House to testify, but I have seen you in committee hearings, and discourse and collegiality goes both ways. And as a representative and as a leader, I have watched you be disrespectful to experts who come to testify, fellow lawmakers, and people who come in, ask questions and push back on your bills. And there are times where you can't defend the legislation. You say, well, the Attorney General will defend this. It's not the Attorney General's job to defend your legislation. Or you'll say, this is just a conversation starter. A conversation starter on legislation happens over drinks or over coffee, not before you put pen to paper. And there was a bill that you voted against that would require the Attorney General to produce a report that would give us gun violence statistics and a way to use data and to be measured and thoughtful, and you voted against it. So this seems to be a pet issue and one that you will just take all the way to the extreme, and I don't think that you are open to balanced or measured approaches in this issue.
You can
Yes.
rebut that.
Yes.
Can I just ask one question, Elizabeth?
Yes.
So anytime I mention her legislative record, she gets a rebuttal?
No,
Okay.
but
But you
on this
mentioned
one,
my behavior. No, this is, that's not.
This is going to be her third.
Okay.
No, it's not. It's
Okay. Guys, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Hello, what I'm looking for here is for them to have a discussion. So if after Justine talks and Amanda wants to talk again, she will be allowed to and it won't count against her. This is a really awesome opportunity for us to be able to hear from them, and I'm hoping that you guys can help let that happen, okay? I understand this is not, I understand we're all looking and counting, but I'm hoping that you guys can allow these two to discuss this as they are. Well,
So I was not counting, but it was my understanding that when one of the candidates mentioned behavior outside the forum, that was not included in our rebuttal counts. Elizabeth?
that is accurate from last week, and I will admit that
And the email that
we
you
don't
sent
have,
us.
and we don't, you know, I'm an imperfect person. We are doing this and trying to present as clear a form as possible. So I apologize for any miscommunication, and
I just wanted to clarify that I don't have a legislative record, so if it's
But I
going.
could talk about you outside of what you're doing.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't about every time I mention a bill that she voted on being outside of this forum, because that would be her entire role as state representative.
okay.
Okay,
no.
okay, thank you for clarifying.
Okay, so I'm gonna now take my time not in one of my rebuttal remarks. The gun issue, as everybody can see here, is difficult. People come up to the State House. One of my colleagues remarked when we voted on my bills that we had to be scared of the people in the gallery, and they didn't even have guns. It brings a lot of high intensity. They were banging on the doors to get into our chamber. They come up and make a lot of threats. It's not a pet issue of mine, and I find that actually very offensive to people who have lost children to gun violence. What I will say is this idea that I am disrespectful and intolerant and anything is that, you know, somebody who is campaigning with our former town council president who said, and I'm sorry to, I think, Amelia and whoever else is out there, but said to a town employee during negotiations, I'm gonna cut off your balls and feed them to my goddamn dog, actually does not care that much about decorum and public officials and cares more about trying to create
That is
problems.
so inappropriate for you to bring that up.
All right, if you want to stick with the issue of guns.
Well, no, because she brought up not.
I understand,
She
but
brought
let's,
up the
you may address your.
And it's about, you know, she addressed the decorum, the lack of decorum.
All right, I'm going to switch to Amanda if you want to have anything to say.
Yeah, so I'm saying that when I watched you on television, in your role as a public servant, you were disrespectful to fellow lawmakers and you were disrespectful to members of the public. I am campaigning on my own integrity, and I am campaigning by myself and running a race that I am proud of. Other people who are supportive of me is irrelevant to my positions on issues and your positions on issues. There are people across this state that I am sure you do not want to be held to account for every single thing they've said and every single thing they've done because you are in the same political party. If we're going to go down that rabbit hole from 2018, then I will step away and bring someone up here who you want to spar with. I want to talk about the issues, and I want to talk about your role as a public servant, not what was said at a town council meeting 4 years ago. Comments made about
Elizabeth, this is not appropriate. I said I would come and have a debate and not in this way. Like I've
I
been
understand
through
that.
this.
We could just move on to another
This is
question.
like-
Well, I mean, there was a
ridiculous.
comment made that I was disrespectful to people who have lost children.
And
And
I think calling gun violence prevention bills a pet issue is disrespectful. I mean, and a lot of people, the people here may not, and that's fine. I've gone through debate after debate with the opposition thinking packing this room is gonna win elections and intimidate me. And it's not gonna intimidate this movement, and it's offensive to people who have lost people to gun violence.
Okay, Amanda, do you have anything to say?
no, I just think
I'm
it's
allowed to say that.
okay. No, yeah, we'll move on.
Okay, and I totally lost count on where we are, but no, I haven't. I have not. Hold on. Amanda started with that one, so Justine, you will start with this one. Do you support tax-funded vouchers for private schools?
I do not support tax-funded vouchers for private schools. That would only hurt our public education system. I will share that, as many people know, Amanda might not, for several years my kids did attend a private school and they moved to the East Greenwich Public Schools last year. And I will say that they are having a much better and more rigorous education at the public schools here in East Greenwich than they had at their private school. They're having a much better time socializing, much better teachers and administrators. So the grass is not always greener. To put that out there, private school can sometimes be the answer for some kids, but is not the answer from all kids. And I can speak from experience about that. And we just cannot be taking any more money away. Private schools are very expensive. I mean, Wheeler costs $60,000 a year. Rocky Hill costs $40,000 a year. You know, we cannot be burdening our residents, making their public schools worse, you know, paying these giant private school tuitions.
Amanda?
No, I don't support a voucher, taxpayer-funded voucher system.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I think this is the last question. We'll start with Amanda. Electric vehicles are fast gaining in popularity. What could or should the state do to increase the number of charging stations?
I mean, I think that relying solely on electric vehicles to solve the climate change issue is, short-sighted and counterproductive. I think we could, put up a few more charging stations, but I don't feel strongly about advocating for that when it comes to climate change. I'd much rather see that the deforestation stop in our state. We have cut down since 2018 over 1,000 acres of forests. As a point of comparison, agriculture is less than 200 acres, housing is less than 200 acres, commercial development is less than 200 acres. The Rhode Island forests take 500,000 metric tons of CO2 out of the air every year. That's the equivalent of taking 100,000 cars off the road. So I would, for everyone who's in support of the Act on Climate and making things greener and forcing electric cars and solar panels, I think the first thing we need to do is make sure that we're not cutting down forests and trees and green space that actually help the climate and help the air in this effort, again, to be the fastest to do something and not the best to do something. Rhode Island's Act on Climate is the most aggressive climate bill in the country. There's no other state that has a goal that we have in the 2030s. And I think it's, again, short-sighted and counterproductive to be going about it the way we're going about it. And when it comes to solar, we said to cities and towns before we passed this bill this past year that my opponent supported, that we would let cities and towns get increased tax revenue from these solar fields, and then we did a bait and switch on them, and now they cannot. And so, I feel you want to put up electric charging stations, have at it, but I think there's much bigger climate change issues in this state, like cutting down forests.
Thank you. Justine?
Thank you. Yeah, so that's a simple question. We can just put up more charging stations. There are a lot of charging stations at, rest stops and park and rides and all of that stuff, and we should have more of them. But some of the concrete things I want to do, I think just like Doreen spoke about, I just had to go buy a new car. It's a very difficult process right now, and it's very expensive. We were looking to potentially buy a plug-in hybrid or electric car. So of course we looked at all the laws about what rebates we would get and all of that kind of stuff. First of all, you can't buy an electric car now if you want one. You can have one. You can be on a waiting list and get one in like a year, which is a little bit of a problem. But also in our state, we passed a law that would give you a rebate if you bought an electric car, which I voted for, but not if that electric car was more than, I believe, $45,000 or $50,000. And unfortunately, electric cars and plug-in hybrids are very expensive right now. For whatever reason, and because they're novel and because there's not a lot of them. And so I would be looking to repeal that, and no matter what price of electric car you buy here in Rhode Island, you would be eligible for the tax rebate, because I think that would incentivize more people to buy them, and I think that they should get them, that you shouldn't not be able to get an SUV, because like the SUVs all cost more than that. And so I think people should get the rebates for those. And then go plug them in at one of our many charging stations.
Okay, thank you. It's now time for closing statements, and we'll start with you, Justine.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So thank you everyone for being here tonight. A lot of times, I talk to a lot of folks in town, a lot of moms and dads at school, a lot of people on the soccer sidelines, and people are like, how do you do this job? I could never do that. It's a lot of time, right? It's a lot of sometimes animosity, it's difficult. And it is not easy. It was not easy when Senator Valverde and I went up against rich special interests, and also in the House, legislators much more powerful than me who wanted to bring that recycler to East Greenwich. but we formed a coalition. I kept that coalition together in the House, and we passed that bill. It is not easy to go up against the NRA and the gun lobby, and I think that is very clear. They try to be aggressive and intimidating and muddy the waters about what is the reality of these gun bills and what do they mean. But I went up against them, and we won, and we do have the strongest magazine ban in the nation. It wasn't easy to go up against the liquor lobby and lobby for our small businesses here in East Greenwich when I work with Line Cider, to make it easier for small businesses and breweries to sell their product directly to consumers. You do not want to mess with the liquor lobby. We did that. You know, it's not easy to go up and talk to your colleagues from very disadvantaged communities and say, we need more money for East Greenwich. But we did that. In the years that I've been here that we have needed more money for East Greenwich schools, I have brought that back. I have gone up against powerful special interests, against leadership, against anyone that I needed to deliver what the people of East Greenwich needed, and I will continue to do that in the State House, and I hope to earn your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Amanda?
Thank you. So thank you again to the hosts, and thank you everyone for coming this evening. I think this was by and large a helpful discussion for voters. I think you've seen a difference in philosophy over whether the government at the state level should be large and controlling and spend money at a rate that is unsustainable, or whether we should have local control and send money back to taxpayers and support local businesses. I think you've seen a difference in policy priorities, supporting small businesses, promoting public education, lowering taxes for people in this state that are struggling. My opponent has voted against a number of bills throughout the budget process this year that don't cut taxes and make it harder for people to afford their home heating oil or their gas or their electric bills. I also think you've seen a difference in personality and leadership and representation. And it is all too often that I hear, going door to door over the last 6 months, I don't get my emails answered, I don't get my calls answered, I don't get responses. I need help with X and I don't get it. Public service is incredibly important to me. I have been in public service since I was 20 years old. And the role of a state representative is to serve your constituents, all your constituents, East Greenwich, West Greenwich, those you agree with, those you don't agree with. And I think saying we built coalitions and I'm bipartisan and I work across party lines, I think that's all well and good if you can stand up here and say it for 45 minutes. But your record shows that you don't. And it is public and it is available to anybody who thinks I am here to intimidate you or that I am here to miscategorize anything. And so I think there is a choice in November. It is between a difference in philosophy, a difference in priorities, and a different way of serving the public. So I hope I've earned your support.
Thank you, Amanda and Justine. And with that, that's the conclusion of our candidate forums for 2022. I appreciate all the candidates